I'll never forget the way Daniel's hand froze mid-motion as he reached for his wine when he saw me standing there. Shock painted every line of his face, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. If betrayal had a portrait, it would be the terror in his eyes that night. The text message wasn't meant for me. That's how it always starts. Isn't it a digital slip that unravels the perfect illusion? We call marriage. Can't wait to celebrate your promotion tonight. Same place, 8 p.m. I'll make sure she thinks I'm working late again. I stared at my husband's phone for what felt like hours, though it was probably just seconds. He had left it on the kitchen counter while showering. Careless in a way that only comes with comfort, with the absolute certainty that your spouse trusts you completely, and I did for 10 years. I did. The message was from someone saved as Sean from marketing, but unless Sean had recently started wearing Chanel No. 5, I doubted it was actually a man. The perfume lingered on my husband's shirt. Sometimes I'd convinced myself it was from the department store he walked through on his way home. I felt my chest tighten with a sharp, unfamiliar pain, as if the world had tilted slightly off its axis. My breath came in shallow gasps as a wave of disbelief crashed over me, followed by a deep, hollow ache that settled in my stomach. I tried to reason with myself, to find some innocent explanation, but the words on the screen glared back with cruel clarity. My mind spiraled. Was it me? Had I done something wrong? How long had I been blind? I set the phone down exactly where I found it and moved mechanically toward the living room window. Outside, autumn was happening. Without my permission, our maple tree was shedding its fiery red leaves. The one we planted when we bought the townhouse, promising to grow old together beneath its branches. I've got that big investor meeting tonight. He called out from upstairs, "Don't wait up." I watched his reflection in the mirror as he knotted his tie, the navy one I'd given him for our anniversary. He was smiling to himself, a private smile that I now realized wasn't meant for me. "The Milton account," I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Yeah," he replied without hesitation. "Daniel needs backup for the presentation, could go late." The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. No stumbling, no tells. How many times had I heard variations of this same excuse? How many dinners eaten alone? How many nights fallen asleep to the glow of my phone, waiting for a text that he was on his way home? I kissed him goodbye that morning with a smile that mirrored his false rehearsed, hiding secrets behind teeth. Only one of us knew we were both lying when he left. I called in sick to work. I never call. In sick, I've built my career on reliability, on being the person everyone could count on, including him, especially him. The restaurant where they were meeting wasn't hard to find. Same place meant habits patterns. The things people in affairs develop when they think they're being careful, but are actually being predictable. But I didn't go there right away. No, first, I made a different call to Emily Carter, the CEO of the company, where both my husband and his Sean from marketing worked. Emily and I had met at several company functions, and she'd always been impressed by my background in financial law, a career I had scaled back after my husband's career needed more attention. "Emily, it's Rachel." "Yes. It has been a while. Listen, I have something rather delicate to discuss with you. It concerns one of your recent promotions." 3 hours later, I had everything I needed: confirmation that a woman named Vanessa Cole had just been promoted to Senior Operations Manager, a position she had apparently secured after presenting my husband's work as her own, and Emily's genuine shock. When I showed her the evidence I'd gathered over the afternoon, I hadn't planned to dress up, but something deep inside me demanded armor for the battle ahead. I chose emerald green, a power color. The dress. I'd been saving for our anniversary next month. Funny how plans change as I applied my lipstick. I thought about the last decade of my life, the fertility treatments that failed, the career opportunities I declined to support his growth, the loneliness that had become so normal I'd stopped noticing it. You know what the worst part is? I asked my reflection. I still love him, and that makes me furious. As I gripped the edge of the sink so tightly my knuckles turned white, a wave of nausea mixing with the rage twisting in my chest. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out every other sound, and I felt like I was teetering on the edge of something I could never come back from. I forced myself to breathe. Each inhale shaky, each exhale a desperate attempt to steady the storm inside me. The thought of seeing them together, of stepping into that restaurant, made my legs feel weak. But I couldn't let myself falter. Not now. At exactly 8:17 p.m., I walked into Bellagio's, an upscale French restaurant downtown. Emily was beside me, her face grim with professional disappointment. My husband didn't see me at first. He was too busy reaching across the table holding hands with a woman whose auburn hair fell in perfect waves around a face I'd seen in company photographs. Vanessa Cole, the woman wearing the promotion that should have been his if he hadn't given her his ideas, his work, probably in between giving her everything else that was supposed to be mine. They were laughing, champagne bubbles catching the soft light, his wedding ring tucked safely in his pocket. "I imagined, isn't that your husband, Rachel?" Emily asked loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Time froze, as my husband's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine with the purest expression of terror I've ever seen. "Yes," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent section of the restaurant, "and I believe congratulations are in order for Miss Cole's remarkable promotion." The silence that followed felt like glass, fragile, dangerous, and about to shatter. My husband's face cycled through emotions so quickly I almost felt sorry for him. Shock, fear, anger, and, finally, the desperate scramble for control. "Rachel," he said, rising from his seat, "this is work-related. Vanessa just got promoted, and as her mentor, I stopped. One word, quiet but firm. Just stop." Daniel. Vanessa was staring at Emily Carter with growing horror, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. "The CEO wasn't supposed to be here." "This wasn't in her script, Miss Carter," she stammered. "What a surprise." "Indeed," Emily replied coldly, though not as surprising as discovering that the proposal that earned you this promotion appears to have been largely developed by someone else. My husband stepped toward me, lowering his voice. "Rachel, let's discuss this at home. You're making a scene." "A scene?" I laughed. But there was no humor in it. "Is that what this is to you, a scene? Not the moment your wife discovers that you've been lying to her face for how long, Daniel? How long has this been going on?" His silence was my answer. "You know what's truly remarkable?" I continued, my voice steadier than my heart. "Last month, when I told you I was thinking about going back to work full-time, you convinced me to wait. The timing isn't right. You said my career is at a critical juncture. You said, was that because you needed me safely at home, while you built Vanessa's career instead of your own or mine?" Nearby diners were pretending not to listen, but the restaurant had grown uncomfortably quiet. A waiter hovered uncertainly nearby, unsure whether to intervene. "It wasn't like that," Daniel hissed. "You're twisting everything." "Am I then?" Explain why Vanessa's groundbreaking proposal contains passages identical to drafts I helped you with at our kitchen table. Explain why you've had late meetings on exactly the same night. She posts pictures from this very restaurant on her Instagram. "Oh yes, I found those this afternoon." Explain why you told me the Milton account meeting was tonight when Emily here confirms there is no such meeting scheduled. With each question, Daniel seemed to shrink, his customary confidence crumbling. Vanessa finally found her voice. "Daniel told me you two had an understanding. He said your marriage was just for appearances." I turned to her slowly. "Did he? How convenient for both of you. And did he also tell you that last week was our 10th anniversary, that we've been trying to have a baby for 2 years, that I reduced my work hours so he could pursue his ambitions?" Her perfectly made-up face paled for a moment. I almost felt pity until I remembered the texts I'd found. The ones where she'd mocked my pathetic devotion to a man who was barely interested. "Honestly, I might have respected you more if you'd earned that promotion fairly," I said to her, "but taking credit for his work while also taking my husband, that's just efficient." "I suppose," Emily cleared her throat, "Miss Cole, I believe we need to review the circumstances of your promotion." Monday morning, my office, 9 a.m. The restaurant manager appeared, offering us a private room to continue our discussion as we moved through the dining area. I felt eyes on my back, heard the murmurs in a small corporate community like ours. This would be everywhere by morning. In the private room, Daniel tried again. "Rachel, you're overreacting. It was just dinner." "Just dinner," I repeated flatly, like it was just drinks last month, just a conference in Seattle in February, Just a team-building weekend in January when I found sand in your suitcase, even though the resort was in the mountains. Each example landed like a slap. He hadn't known I suspected, hadn't known I'd been collecting. These inconsistencies like stones in my pocket growing heavier with each passing month. You know what hurts the most? I continued my voice. Finally, breaking not the affair. Not even the lies. It's that you made me doubt myself all those times I felt something was wrong, and you convinced me I was being paranoid, insecure, needy. You made me apologize for not trusting you enough. Vanessa was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of fear for her career, her reputation. Emily stood by the door, her presence a reminder that actions have professional consequences, as well as personal ones. Do you remember last Christmas? I asked Daniel, quietly, why you'd withdrawn so much money from our savings, and you convinced me I'd agreed to that investment opportunity that I had supposedly forgotten about. That money went to the down payment on her condo, didn't it? His silence was another confession. Our fertility treatments. I whispered the pain of this betrayal, the freshest 2 rounds of IVF, while you were sleeping with her. Was any of it real for you? Were you ever actually trying to build a family with me, or was I just a convenient cover story for your real life? I did want children with you. He said the first honest thing he'd uttered all night. You just what, couldn't resist, couldn't help yourself, couldn't honor the most basic promises we made to each other? I gave everything to this marriage. I shaped my life around his needs, his career, his dreams, and all the while he was building a parallel life with someone else. I gave you everything. I said the words catching in my throat, and you treated it like nothing. What Daniel never understood about me was that beneath my supportive, accommodating exterior lived a woman who had once been the top litigation strategist at my firm. I didn't get emotional, I got methodical, while he believed I was at home nursing my heartbreak. Over the next 2 weeks, I was actually executing a carefully crafted plan. The confrontation at the restaurant was just the opening move. Dramatic, yes, but necessary to throw them off balance. Are you sure you want to do this? My old law partner Samantha asked as we reviewed documents in her office. There are simpler ways to divorce him. I took a sip of my coffee, my hand perfectly steady. This isn't about simple. This is about truth. The truth was, I'd suspected something was wrong for over a year, call it intuition or self-preservation, but I'd begun documenting inconsistencies. Months ago, credit card statements that didn't match his stories, mileage on the car that couldn't be explained by his supposed routes, work emails I'd glimpsed that contradicted his claimed projects. What I hadn't told Daniel at the restaurant was that I'd already met with our financial advisor 3 days before the text incident. Something about our tax documents had seemed off, and I was right. Daniel had been diverting company funds into a separate account, not just any funds, but specifically the budget allocated to the project that earned Vanessa her promotion. The company will want to handle this quietly. Samantha noted corporate fraud cases are PR nightmares. Emily understands that, I replied. That's why she agreed to my terms. Those terms were carefully constructed, a full investigation into the financial improprieties, with the promise that if the company handled the matter ethically, I wouldn't take what I knew to their competitors or the press. Meanwhile, I'd been building another case entirely the day after the restaurant confrontation, while Daniel was sleeping at a hotel. My demand: I had visited my doctor for a complete STI panel, not because I suspected anything I needed to know. All clear, the doctor had said with a sympathetic smile. But Rachel, your hormone levels. Have you been taking fertility medications recently? I hadn't, not for 3 months. Since our last failed IVF attempt, a quick call to our fertility clinic confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. Daniel had requested they send his prescription renewals to a different address. My hands were trembling as I ended the call, the realization crashing over me like icy water. A sharp, searing pain cut through my chest at the thought of every injection, every hope, every sleepless night spent praying for a child that would never come. Not because of fate, but because of his choices. The betrayal felt deeper than any affair, a violation of something sacred. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall, my body frozen between grief and fury. A quiet, poisonous thought slithered into my mind. What if it wasn't just him? What if I wasn't enough, wasn't lovable enough, strong enough, or worthy enough for him to want a child with me? The shame settled in my bones like a dark fog, whispering that maybe I was the real flaw in our story, and the weight of that doubt felt heavier than anything he had done. He'd been sabotaging our fertility treatments, likely to avoid pregnancy complications with his double life. Each new discovery should have devastated me, but instead I felt a strange clarity. Every betrayal was another piece of evidence, another tool I could use. You're handling this remarkably well. My sister observed when I finally confided in her, I'm not handling it at all. Yet I replied, I'm just preparing. The most difficult part was maintaining normalcy. When Daniel began his campaign to save our marriage, the flowers, the tearful apologies, the promises of therapy and change, he ended things with Vanessa completely and permanently. His words and seemed genuinely desperate to repair what he'd broken. I let him believe it was working. I accepted his apologies with measured reluctance. I agreed to counseling sessions where I spoke carefully about trust and healing, all while meeting with lawyers, financial advisors, and Emily Carter in between. He thinks we're reconciling. I told Emily during one of our meetings, and are you? She asked, studying me with concern. I smiled slightly. I'm reconciling with myself, the self I set aside to become what Daniel needed. Emily had become an unexpected ally. After discovering how Daniel and Vanessa had manipulated company projects and funds, she was determined to address the situation properly. But she also seemed to genuinely respect how I was handling my personal crisis. The internal audit will be complete by Friday. She informed me the evidence is substantial. At home, I maintained the perfect performance of a wounded wife. Considering forgiveness, I returned to cooking Daniel's favorite meals. I listened to his explanations and rationalizations. I even allowed him back into our bedroom, though I made excuses to avoid intimacy. I think we're making real progress. He told me hopefully one evening, 3 weeks after the restaurant confrontation. I think so too. I replied, and in a way it wasn't a lie. I was making tremendous progress, just not toward the goal he imagined. The most stunning discovery came from an unlikely source, Vanessa's assistant Kelly. She contacted me through LinkedIn with a simple message. I have information you might want about your husband and Vanessa over coffee at a cafe far from their office. Kelly revealed that Vanessa had been recording conversations with Daniel Insurance. She called it in case things went south. Those recordings included discussions of how they'd used my input on Daniel's work to develop the proposal that earned her promotion. Discussions of their future plans and most damning strategies for continuing to deceive me. Why are you telling me this? I asked Kelly. Her expression hardened, because she did the same thing to the last married man she was involved with, and because she takes credit for everyone else's work, including mine. I didn't judge Kelly's motivations in strategic battles. You don't question why allies appear. You simply use the advantage they provide, and I was about to use every advantage I had accumulated. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Daniel had no idea that he would be the primary topic of discussion or that I had been invited to attend. As I laid out my clothes for the meeting, a sharp charcoal suit I hadn't worn since leaving my firm, I felt not anger or sadness, but a strange sense of awakening. The woman who had dimmed her own light to help Daniel shine was gone. In her place stood someone I'd almost forgotten existed. The strategist, the advocate, the woman who never backed down from a fight. I hope you're ready, I whispered to my reflection, because tomorrow the truth comes out. The conference room at Colin Mason Consulting fell silent as I walked in, beside Emily Carter, the board members. 7 men and 2 women in impeccable business attire glanced at one another in confusion. This was not on their agenda. Daniel was already seated reviewing presentation materials when he saw me. The color drained from his face. Rachel, what are you doing here? Before I could answer, the double doors opened again, and Vanessa Cole entered, stopping abruptly when she saw me. Please everyone, take your seats, Emily said, her authoritative voice cutting through the tension. We have a serious matter to address before our regular agenda. As everyone settled, I remained standing, placing a USB drive on the table. Many of you know me as Daniel Mason's wife. I began, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. What you may not know is that I was once senior litigation counsel at Harper & Davis, specializing in corporate fraud cases. I clicked the remote to start the presentation I'd prepared. The first slide showed financial records, company funds redirected to shell accounts, expense reports with discrepancies, project budgets with unexplained allocations for the past 18 months. 2 employees of this firm have been engaging in financial improprieties, misappropriation of company resources, and fraud. I continued, they've diverted approximately $237,000 of company funds for personal use, while simultaneously manipulating project outcomes for personal advancement. Daniel half rose from his chair. This is absurd. Emily, why is my wife making these accusations in a board meeting? Emily's expression remained impassive, because the audit confirmed everything she brought to our attention. Daniel, please continue. Rachel, the next slide's detailed how Daniel and Vanessa had claimed credit for work done by other team members, including projects I had unknowingly helped develop during late-night work sessions at our dining table, emails, presentation drafts with tracked changes, and testimonials from team members, built an irrefutable case. Additionally, I said, clicking to the next slide, MS Cole has been recording conversations without consent, including in this very building, which violates company policy and in some instances, state law. I played a brief audio clip where Daniel and Vanessa could clearly be heard discussing how to take credit for work done by her team member. Vanessa jumped to her feet. Those recordings are private property. You had no right. Actually, Emily interrupted. They were made on company devices and stored on company servers. They are company property, and when allegations of misconduct arose, we had every right to review them. The board members were exchanging shocked glances. One of them, an older woman named Margaret, looked at me with something like respect. In her eyes, the full documentation has been provided to each of you. I continued, nodding toward the USB drives I'd placed before each board member, including the complete audit report and witness statements. But this isn't just about corporate malfeasance. I turned directly to face Daniel. For the first time, my husband and MS Cole have been engaged in a relationship for nearly 2 years. During this time, they've used company resources to facilitate their affair, including falsifying expense reports for hotel stays, manipulating work schedules, and misrepresenting their whereabouts to both the company and to me. Daniel's face had moved from shock to fury. This is a personal matter that has no place in a business setting. It became a business matter. Emily countered, when you used company funds to support your extramarital relationship, including, she consulted her notes, $42,000 toward a down payment on MS Cole's condominium. One of the board members removed his glasses in disbelief. Is this accurate, Daniel? My husband's silence was damning. There's more, I said quietly, the fertility treatments that Daniel and I were supposedly undergoing together. He was deliberately sabotaging them, having prescriptions sent elsewhere, missing critical appointments, all while pretending to want a family with me. This revelation wasn't strictly relevant to the business case, but I needed it on record. I needed everyone to understand the depth of the deception. In light of these findings, Emily said, taking over, I am recommending immediate termination of both Daniel Mason and Vanessa Cole's employment with this firm, full recovery of misappropriated funds, and referral of the financial improprieties to the appropriate authorities. The vote was unanimous, as security was called to escort Daniel and Vanessa from the building. My husband made one last desperate attempt, Rachel. He said, his voice breaking, everything I did was for us, for our future. You have to believe me. I looked at him, really looked at him. Perhaps for the first time in years, the man I had loved, supported, and believed in, the man who had betrayed every promise we'd made, the most valuable thing I ever gave you. I replied calmly. Wasn't the career support, or the sacrificed opportunities, or even the love, it was the benefit of the doubt, and you'll never get that from me again. As they were led away, Margaret from the board approached me. That was quite impressive. She said, Emily tells me you left a promising legal career. I did. I acknowledged. She handed me her card. When you're ready, I think we should talk about your future. My firm could use someone with your attention to detail and strategic thinking. As the room cleared, Emily stayed behind. Was it worth it? she asked gently, bringing it all into the open. Like this, I thought about the question carefully. Secrets thrive in darkness. I finally said, I've had enough of living there. Whatever happens next, at least it will be in the light. As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. You've ruined everything. I hope you're satisfied. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to the man who had once been the center of my universe. Instead, I texted my sister. It's done. I'm coming home, not the house. I'd shared with Daniel I'd already moved my essential belongings to my sister's guest house, home to myself, to the woman I'd nearly forgotten how to be. 6 months can change everything or nothing at all. In my case, it changed the external circumstances of my life completely, while simply revealing what had been inside me all along. The divorce was finalized with surprising speed. Daniel didn't fight it. Not after the evidence I had compiled. The house sold within weeks in the hot market, and the proceeds, minus what he owed for the misappropriated company funds, were divided according to the settlement. I did not take him for everything he had, though my lawyer insisted I could have some, suggested this was weakness on my part. I saw it differently. On the day the divorce papers were signed, I sat alone in my car outside the courthouse for nearly an hour. The pen had felt heavier than I expected. The final signature, both a liberation and a loss. Memories of holidays spent together, whispered promises late at night, and plans for a future that would never happen flashed like cruel fragments across my mind. A silent sob threatened to escape my throat, but I swallowed it down, determined not to let the pain win. In that moment, I realized grief and relief can exist side by side, each sharp and undeniable. But as I watched couples walk in and out of the courthouse hand in hand, a cold dread curled in my stomach. What if I could never trust someone like that again? What if every kind gesture in the future felt like a mask, every promise like a lie waiting to unravel? The thought terrified me more than the loneliness itself, a quiet fear whispering that I might be too broken to ever let someone close again. I wanted nothing that would keep us tethered to each other. No reason for future contact or conflict. Clean breaks heal faster. Vanessa faced her own consequences without Daniel's protection. The full extent of her professional deceptions came to light. The last I heard, she had moved to another state, trying to rebuild a career tarnished by scandal. I didn't wish her well, but I no longer wished her anything at all. Indifference, I discovered, is truly the opposite of love. I took the position Margaret offered at her legal consulting firm, specializing in corporate governance and ethics. An irony not lost on me. My first major client was Emily's company, helping them strengthen their internal controls and oversight mechanisms. You know, Emily said during one of our meetings, some might say you orchestrated this whole situation to your advantage. I smiled slightly, and what would you say? I'd say you simply made sure the truth worked in your favor. For once, the hardest moments came unexpectedly. Finding Daniel's favorite coffee mug in a box I was unpacking in my new apartment, driving past the fertility clinic where we'd invested so much hope, waking up on what would have been our anniversary, momentarily forgetting that everything had changed. But there were unexpected joys too. Rediscovering my professional confidence, reconnecting with friends I drifted away from during my marriage, the simple pleasure of making decisions based solely on my own preferences. My sister worried I was avoiding processing the pain by immersing myself in work. I'm not avoiding it. I told her during our weekly dinner, I'm just not letting it define me. And I wasn't. The betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. There's a particular kind of strength that comes from surviving what you once thought would destroy you on a crisp fall evening. I found myself back at Bellagio's, the scene of the confrontation that had set everything in motion. It wasn't a deliberate choice. A colleague had suggested it for dinner, unaware of its significance in my personal history, as we were seated at a table, ironically, not far from where I had found Daniel and Vanessa that night. My colleague asked about my wedding ring tan line, which was finally fading. You never talk about your divorce. She observed it must have been difficult. I considered the question as I unfolded my napkin. The most difficult part wasn't losing him. I finally said it was realizing that what I thought I had, what I had built my life around, never actually existed. Do you regret it? The years with him, the waiter arrived with water, giving me a moment to think. I regret allowing myself to become smaller. I said after he left. I regret the dreams I postponed indefinitely, but I don't regret loving completely, even if it wasn't returned in kind later. That night, as I walked home through the cooling air, my phone buzzed with a text. Daniel, breaking 6 months of silence. I miss you. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Can we talk? I stopped beneath a streetlight and read it twice 6 months ago, even 3 months ago. Those words might have cracked the foundation I was rebuilding. Now they were just words from someone I used to know. I didn't respond. Instead, I deleted the message and continued walking my steps, light and sure, on the pavement. Some people enter our lives to stay. Others come to teach us something essential about ourselves before leaving. Daniel had taught me my own strength, not by supporting it, but by testing it to its limits. As I reached my apartment building, I paused to look up at the night sky, something I rarely took time to do during my marriage. A scattering of stars was visible, despite the city lights enduring and distant. Thank you. I whispered, not to Daniel or to God, or even to fate, but to myself, the self that had been patient enough to gather evidence, brave enough to face the truth, and strong enough to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. The marriage had ended, the betrayal had been exposed, but my story was just beginning, and this time I was writing it for myself. Dear friend, sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we spend years trying not to see. Yet, as the Stoics remind us, we cannot control what others choose to do, but we can choose how we rise from what they leave behind. You are not defined by someone else's betrayal, but by the courage it takes to face it, learn from it, and begin again. Every heartbreak, every lie uncovered can become the first brick in a stronger foundation, if you let it. And remember, healing is not a race. It's a quiet promise you make to yourself to keep moving forward, no matter how slowly. Your strength is not in never falling, but in standing back up, each time with your head held higher. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more stories that speak to the heart. Your support truly means the world.